Martin Harum, who was the chief of defense from Estonia, this morning, he was quoted as saying, "We'll never be safe from Russia until it breaks up into a lot of little countries." I thought that was a powerful statement from the chief of defense of Estonia to acknowledge that as long as Russia remains the Russian Federation, we're never going to be able to deal with them, or the threat will always be there. And General Sir Richard Sheriff, I heard him the other day highlight the fact that Russia has never been a nation state. It's been an empire of some sort from its very beginning. And because of that, it's never had to reckon with its past. And until it does, we'll keep getting Putin or whoever comes after him. And so this never stops. So this is why I think long term, it's in our interest to make sure that Russia is absolutely defeated, beaten on the battlefield, and then it forces them to have the reckoning that Germany had and that Japan had after the end of the Second World War.
In a recent interview, retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, the former commanding general of the U.S. Army Europe, expressed confidence in Ukraine's forthcoming counteroffensive against Russia. He spoke following Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy's announcement that the offensive was momentarily postponed until additional Western weaponry and military supplies arrived. President Zelenskyy had emphasized the need to wait, as initiating the offensive with the current resources would result in significant casualties, which he deemed unacceptable. Hodges clarified that the notion of a delay was inaccurate, suggesting that the concept of a spring offensive was an invention. He believed that no specific date or season had been designated for the operation. He outlined 3 conditions that needed to be met before informing President Zelenskyy about the readiness to proceed. Firstly, Ukrainian forces must possess the necessary strength, preparedness, and training for a successful operation. Secondly, Russian forces must be sufficiently weakened and disrupted for the Ukrainian attack to be effective. Lastly, the condition of the ground must support the movement of numerous armored vehicles. Hodges commended the Ukrainian General Staff for their impressive skills and discipline, noting their adeptness at safeguarding information. He acknowledged that there was more knowledge about Russian forces than about Ukrainian forces, as it should be. He expressed expectations of the Ukrainian forces' success, attributing it to the rigorous training and the provision of advanced equipment by the West. Furthermore, he highlighted the efforts made by the Ukrainians to strengthen their armored brigades, which would aid in penetrating the extensive Russian defenses. Regarding foreign aid to Ukraine, Hodges emphasized that American support should not be contingent on the offensive achieving significant success. He was pleased to hear President Zelenskyy affirm that American assistance was not tied to the outcome of the attack. Instead, he underscored the importance of curbing Russian aggression, holding them accountable for war crimes, violations of sovereignty, and breaches of international law. He believed that the seriousness of these reasons, along with the global implications of Chinese observation, should dictate the provision of support independent of the offensive's immediate outcome.
This whole thing, not just Crimea, the whole thing could be over by the end of this year. It's up to the United States. And I think UK and Germany and others would follow along if the United States made it very clear that our desired strategic outcome is that Ukraine defeats Russia on the battlefield and fulfills all that President Zelenskyy has described as what victory looks like. And I know everybody on this call has been trying to figure out why is the administration reluctant to do that. And I think they still are not convinced that Ukraine is able to do it. When I hear the Pentagon repeatedly say that even if they do this big offensive, it might not deliver what we're all hoping. Well, of course not, if we don't give them what they need. I mean, this is a self-fulfilling prophecy by the Joint Staff, and I don't understand that. So I think there's a little bit of psychological, they just still can't imagine that little Ukraine could somehow defeat big Russia, which shows a lack of imagination, but also understanding of what's going on the ground. Secondly, I think the administration is perhaps, and this is 100% speculation on my part, they're not prepared for the outcome if Ukraine defeats Russia. I mean, what happens? You know, and when the dog catches the car, you know, what does it do? And so I think the administration is uncomfortable with the idea, as are many of our European allies, with what happens next. And so I think that's part of the reason they haven't declared we want Ukraine to win. And then the third thing, I don't know this, but I think China is influencing the administration, or considerations about China, that maybe the Chinese have said, we do not want a catastrophic collapse of Russian Federation, which they think might follow the liberation of Crimea. So I've been trying to figure out, how do we influence the administration? And to do that, we'd have to understand, why did they think what they think? So I'm all over the map on trying to figure that out. If we do what Clausewitz says, the political leadership has to describe what is the end to be achieved. That's the job of our civilian leadership. If they do that, then we can accomplish it. In the absence of that, then we're going to continue delivering incrementally. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but that's the part that's frustrating. What do they need? I think you isolate the Crimean Peninsula by severing the land bridge, and I don't know this, but I think that's what this offensive is going to be about. When and where and however it happens, it's ultimately about isolation of Crimea. And then you bring up the long-range precision weapons to begin to make Crimean Peninsula untenable. SACEUR General Cavoli said that precision can defeat mass if you have enough time. And Russia's only advantage is mass infantry. And so you neutralize that advantage by going after headquarters, ammunition storage, transportation nodes with precision weapons. It takes some time. If they have that capability, then I think the peninsula becomes untenable for them. And then the third phase, of course, you have to actually enter the peninsula after that and clear it. I think once the Black Sea Fleet's gone, the Russian Air Force is no longer flying there, I think this becomes a much more achievable task. Very, very few people know actually how this is going to unfold. And I think they must laugh to themselves when they hear there's so many experts asking, how come the spring offensive hadn't already started yet, or everybody's an expert on what's going to happen. I certainly don't know where or when it's going to happen. But what I do believe is that they have a lot more combat power than we think they do, that they have been, and this would have taken nerves of steel by the general staff and political courage by President Zelenskyy to withhold some of these newer capabilities, new brigades, to keep them out of Bakhmut, despite the enormous losses that the Ukrainians are suffering in Bakhmut, because they needed time to get these armor brigades ready that will be used if and when and wherever this counteroffensive actually takes place. And so this would have been a decision in terms of operational art, what we would call an economy of force mission. You needed the troops around Bakhmut, many of which were territorial defense force units, to continue to hold off the Russian forces there to buy time. And I think because of that, there probably are several brigades that are equipped with the Ukrainian tanks and armored fighting vehicles, captured Russian equipment. And then, of course, we know a lot of Western delivered equipment is in the hands, and you've got units that have been training with it. I think the General Staff is having to make a decision when you don't want to attack until the conditions are set. And one of the conditions, of course, is weather, trafficability. But the other condition is, are your guys ready? Have you trained enough to be able to do this?